I remember the moment I torched the house. It was a bright Saturday morning, and I was fixing the fireplace because Megan had been nagging me for weeks. Yeah, I should have called a professional, but no, stubborn me wanted to prove I could handle it. You ever have one of those moments where you're doing something, and you know deep down it's about to go sideways, but you just can't stop? That was me. 1 second I'm adjusting some logs, and the next the flames roar to life. It spread fast, like it had been waiting to jump out at me. Smoke, alarms, neighbors shouting. By the time the fire trucks showed up, it was all over. Everything we owned was gone. Megan's reaction? Let's just say she wasn't the comforting, supportive wife you'd expect in a crisis like this. As we stood in the street, the smoldering wreck behind us, she turned to me, face blank, and said, "I'm going out tonight." No yelling, no tears, just cold. I think that hit me harder than the fire itself. So that night, with our baby growing inside her and our future literally in ashes, Megan threw on a tight black dress. Yeah, that one, and told me she was heading to a party. Not just any party, mind you, but a huge get-together that her so-called friend Alyssa was throwing. I should have known something was up. I mean, she's 5 months pregnant. What kind of pregnant woman goes to a rager, right? But when I suggested I come with her, she shot me this death stare and said, "Don't embarrass me. This isn't your scene." Then she just left. So there I was, sitting alone in a cheap hotel room, replaying the events of the day. Our house, gone. My wife at some party, pretending like none of it mattered. The more I thought about it, the more pissed off I got. Here's the thing, though. This wasn't the first time I felt like something was off. Over the past few months, Megan had been different. It started small. A few missed calls, staying late at work, and those text messages she would always hide from me. I ignored it, convinced myself it was nothing. But now, with her out at a party just hours after we lost everything, I couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to it. So I did what any guy would do when suspicion creeps in. I grabbed her iPad from her bag. She had left it unlocked because she's never been good with tech. I opened it up, feeling like a real piece of crap for snooping, but I needed answers. That's when I saw it. A message thread with someone named Ryan. I scrolled up, and my stomach dropped. There were pictures of them, nothing explicit, but the kind you don't send unless you're very close to someone. Flirty messages, mentions of missing him. I sat there, frozen, rereading every disgusting word. She was at this party with him, and I'm here, stuck in a hotel with everything I ever worked for literally in ashes. My blood started boiling. I could hear the pulse in my ears. How long had this been going on? Who the hell was Ryan? I wasn't sure what to do next. The rage in me was building, and I knew confronting her would be explosive. But not yet. First, I needed to know just how deep this betrayal went. The hotel room felt suffocating. My mind was racing, and the walls seemed to close in as I stared at the iPad in disbelief. The messages were clear. Megan wasn't just being distant. She wasn't just tired from being pregnant. She was with someone else. And not just any someone. This guy, Ryan, had been part of her life for a lot longer than I ever suspected. The casual way they talked, the way she shared things with him like their little inside jokes. My wife had a secret life I never saw coming. I scrolled through more of the messages, my hands trembling with a mix of rage and shock. Some texts were dated months back, long before I even had an inkling that anything was wrong. She had been planning meetups with him when she was supposedly at work late or visiting friends. There was one message that stood out, one that made the room spin. It was from a week ago, saying, "I can't wait to see you tonight. Wish I didn't have to go home." Go home to me, her husband. I was shaking. I couldn't stay in that room, not after what I had just seen. I threw on my jacket and stormed out, not really knowing where I was going, just knowing I couldn't sit there while she was out God knows where, probably in his arms. I hopped in my car and drove. My brain felt like it was on fire, like every turn of the wheel was grinding down my sanity. I didn't have a plan, but my instincts drove me straight to that party. Alyssa's place was across town in one of those fancy neighborhoods Megan always talked about wanting to live in. You know, the kind with pristine lawns and quiet, private streets. It was the last place I imagined myself pulling up to that night. But I was done being patient. I needed answers, and I needed them now. When I arrived, it was late, and the place was already in full swing. There were cars lined up down the block, and I could hear the music pumping from inside. The whole scene was wild, like something out of a movie, and somewhere in there, my pregnant wife was acting like she didn't have a care in the world. I parked a few houses down, trying to control the fury bubbling inside me. As I got out of the car, I could already see a few familiar faces from Megan's circle stumbling around in the front yard, drinks in hand. None of them noticed me, just like Megan wanted. I wasn't supposed to be there, remember? Not your scene, she said. Yeah, well, that. I marched up to the front door, every muscle in my body tense, ready for a showdown. When I stepped inside, the party hit me like a punch to the gut. Loud music, dim lighting, people laughing and dancing like it was the best night of their lives. I pushed through the crowd, scanning the room for her, and then I saw her, across the living room, sitting on a couch with him, Ryan. He had his arm casually draped around her shoulders, leaning in close like they were a cozy little couple. She was smiling. Not the stressed, tense Megan I'd seen for weeks, but glowing, relaxed, happy. In that moment, everything I thought I knew about our life shattered. I froze, staring at them. My feet glued to the ground as the world around me seemed to slow down. The music pounded in my ears, but all I could focus on was her face. Megan looked so comfortable with him, so relaxed. Her hand rested on his thigh like it belonged there, like that was her place. Not by my side, but his. Every breath I took felt like it was laced with shards of glass. I could have turned around right there, left the party, driven back to the hotel, and let the flames of anger and betrayal consume me in private. But no, I was beyond that. Something primal took over, something that couldn't stand the sight of her sitting there with him while my life, our life, lay in ashes. I marched across the room, my fists clenched so tightly my nails dug into my palms. Megan didn't even see me coming. She was too busy laughing at whatever joke this piece of trash, Ryan, had whispered in her ear. When I reached the couch, I stood over them for a second, just long enough for the tension to build, and then I said her name. Megan. Her head snapped up like she'd seen a ghost. For a split second, I saw panic flash across her face, but she quickly buried it under that fake smile she's been perfecting for God knows how long. Ryan shifted uncomfortably, pulling his arm away from her shoulder, but she stayed still, trying to play it cool. "What are you doing here?" she asked, her voice steady, but her eyes wide, like she hadn't planned on this moment ever happening. I didn't answer, couldn't. The words were trapped behind the tidal wave of fury building inside me. I just stared at her, hoping she'd have the decency to explain herself, to admit to what she was doing. But she didn't. Instead, she stood up, smoothing out her dress, and looked at me like I was the problem. "You weren't supposed to come," she hissed, her voice low enough so the people around wouldn't hear, but sharp enough to cut through the noise of the party. I glanced at Ryan, who had gone pale and looked like he was ready to bolt. "Who the hell is this?" I asked, my voice barely holding together. Megan rolled her eyes at me like I was being dramatic. "Don't do this here, okay? You're embarrassing yourself." Embarrassing myself? I could feel the anger boiling over, and before I knew what I was doing, I grabbed her arm. Not hard, but just enough to get her attention. "You're the one sitting here with him while I'm back at the hotel trying to figure out what the hell happened to us." She yanked her arm away and glared at me, her eyes cold and unrecognizable. "I told you I needed some space. After everything you did, you really have the nerve to come here and act like I owe you an explanation." "Space," I spat. "This isn't space, Megan. You're pregnant. You're supposed to be with me, but instead you're here with him. How long has this been going on? How long have you been lying to me?" The room seemed to fade out, like everything around us was just background noise to the chaos unfolding between us. I could see the partygoers starting to notice, glancing over, whispering to each other, but I didn't care. Let them watch. Megan didn't flinch. She didn't cry, didn't apologize, didn't even look guilty. She just crossed her arms and gave me this look, this infuriatingly calm, condescending look. "You burned down our house," she said, her voice low but full of venom. "You ruined our life, so don't stand there and act like you're some victim here. Maybe if you hadn't screwed everything up, I wouldn't be here tonight." I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. The way she twisted the blame back on me was unreal. I burned down the house, sure, but that didn't justify this. None of this made sense anymore. I was standing in the middle of my own nightmare, and Megan was the one pulling the strings. Ryan, still sitting there like a deer caught in headlights, finally spoke up. Dude, maybe you should just leave. This isn't what you think. Oh, that was it. Hearing him speak, hearing him defend her, I snapped. I lunged at him, grabbing him by the collar, lifting him off the couch. Megan screamed for me to stop, but I wasn't thinking anymore. It was like my brain had shut off and my body was just reacting. I shoved him back down, but I didn't punch him. Not yet. Is this who you've been sneaking around with? I asked, my voice shaking with rage. This is what you've been hiding from me? Ryan put his hands up, trying to calm me down. Listen, man, it's not what it looks like. I didn't. Megan cut him off, stepping between us, her hands on my chest, pushing me back. Stop it. Just stop. You're making a scene. I looked into her eyes, trying to find the woman I married, the woman I thought I knew. But all I saw was a stranger. And that's when it hit me. She wasn't the person I thought she was anymore. Maybe she never had been. You don't get to play the victim here, Megan, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. Not after this. She glared at me, but she didn't say a word, because we both knew the truth now, didn't we? There was no going back. The air between us was thick, suffocating. Megan stood there, arms still crossed, but I could see the mask slipping. Her eyes darted between me and Ryan, like she was calculating her next move. The tension was unbearable. I was still shaking from the confrontation, my heart pounding so loud I could barely hear the music anymore. The room felt too small, the crowd too close. Ryan had backed off, keeping his distance now, but I could still feel his presence like a stain on everything. My fists were itching to make him pay for what he'd done. But Megan, she was the one I needed answers from. She was the one who ripped my life apart while I was standing in the rubble of our burned-down house, clueless. Finally, she spoke. All right, fine, she snapped, breaking the silence. You want to know the truth? You really want it. Her tone was sharp, almost like she was daring me to regret it, but I was past that point. There was no going back. I had to know just how deep this betrayal ran. So I stared her down and said, Tell me. Stop lying for once and just tell me. Megan's jaw clenched, and I could see the anger flash in her eyes. Not guilt, not regret, just cold anger. And then, like she was tossing a grenade, she said it. I've been seeing Ryan for months. Months. Okay? Since before the fire, before everything. It's not some random fling, and it sure as hell isn't your business anymore. We're done. I blinked, the words crashing over me like a tidal wave. She didn't even flinch as she said it, like admitting to cheating on me for months was no big deal. Like she wasn't pregnant with our baby and wrecking our entire life. Done? I repeated, trying to wrap my head around it. What the hell are you talking about, Megan? We're married. We're having a kid. She rolled her eyes again, that same infuriating gesture that made my blood boil. Oh, please, don't act like this is some fairy tale. Our marriage has been dead for a long time. You were just too blind to see it. I felt like I'd been sucker punched. Dead? I thought things were rough, sure. But dead? No, I didn't believe that. I refused to believe that. But Megan, she was on a roll now, like she'd been holding this in for way too long. I'm sick of it, okay? She spat. I'm sick of living in your mess. The house, the debt, the constant screw-ups. You're suffocating me. And now, after everything, you actually expect me to be grateful to you? To stay in this train wreck of a marriage? Her words were like knives, each one cutting deeper. All this time, I'd been blaming myself for the fire, for the little cracks in our relationship. But here she was, revealing that she'd already made up her mind to leave me long before any of that. So, what, you were just stringing me along? I asked, my voice trembling with a mixture of rage and disbelief. All this time, while I'm out here trying to fix things, you're sneaking off with him? She didn't deny it. I didn't owe you anything, she said, her voice cold and steady. Not after everything you put me through. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. She was flipping everything, twisting it all around to make me the villain. Like I was the reason she was out here with Ryan, like I forced her into this mess. And then, because apparently the universe wasn't done kicking me while I was down, Ryan finally decided to chime in. "Look, man, I didn't mean for this to happen," he said, stepping closer, though Megan shot him a warning glance. It just did. Megan told me how hard things were for her, and I snapped, cutting him off. "You really think I give a damn what she told you? You think you're some hero for swooping in while my life falls apart? You're just a coward. A slimy little coward who couldn't keep his hands off someone else's wife." The room had gone quieter by now, more people turning to watch the spectacle unfold. Megan shifted uncomfortably under the attention, but she didn't back down. "Oh, so now I'm the bad guy, right?" she sneered, folding her arms tighter across her chest. "Like you didn't screw things up long before Ryan came into the picture. You want to know the truth? Fine. I didn't even want to have this baby with you." Those words, they hit harder than anything else she'd said. I could barely breathe. She said it so casually, like she was talking about canceling dinner plans, not our future, not the child she was carrying. "What the hell does that mean?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper now. Megan sighed, like I was exhausting her. "I wanted out long before I got pregnant. But then you..." She paused, catching herself, her expression darkening. "You messed things up with the fire, and I felt trapped. So yeah, I've been seeing Ryan, and I've been happy. Happier than I've been with you in years." I was reeling. How could she stand there in front of all these people and say these things like they didn't matter? Like our entire life, our marriage, was just something she could throw away because she found someone else who made her feel good for a few months? And then, just when I thought things couldn't get worse, Megan said the words that finally broke me. "This baby? I'm not even sure I want to keep it. Not with you in the picture." Everything inside me collapsed in that moment. The woman I thought I loved, the woman I thought I knew, was gone. Her words echoed in my head, over and over. "I'm not even sure I want to keep it. Not with you in the picture." The room around me blurred, the voices faded, and for a second, I felt like I couldn't breathe. My hands went numb, my legs shook, and I had to hold onto the edge of a nearby chair just to stay upright. How could she say that? Our baby. The one thing I thought was keeping us tied together. The one thing I thought we both still cared about. And she just threw it out there like it was nothing. I looked at Megan, hoping to see some sign of regret, some flicker of doubt in her eyes, something that told me she didn't really mean it. But there was nothing. She stood there, staring at me like she was done pretending, like she was done with everything. I snapped. "You selfish, heartless piece of..." I growled, stepping forward, but Megan cut me off again. "Don't make a scene, Chris. Not here." Her voice was cold, no emotion behind it, just this calm command like she still thought she was in control, like I was the one who was acting out of line. Not her, not the woman who had just admitted she was cheating, lying, and willing to throw away our child. I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself, but it wasn't working. Everything inside me was unraveling. A scene? A scene. I laughed bitterly, but it was hollow, empty. "You've been making a scene for months, Megan. You just didn't have the guts to admit it until now." Her face hardened, her jaw set. "I'm done, Chris. Just let it go. This see us? It's over. I'm not doing this anymore." She glanced around the room, clearly aware that everyone was watching us now. Some people had their phones out, probably recording this disaster. I could see Alyssa in the corner, her eyes wide, not daring to come over and intervene. She knew Megan had been caught, and no one wanted to get between us. And Ryan, that spineless bastard, had backed away, standing near the kitchen like he was ready to run if I came at him again. I could see the fear in his eyes, but it didn't matter anymore. I was past him. This was about her. About the lies, the betrayal, the wreckage of everything we'd built together. "I gave you everything," I said, my voice shaking with a mix of anger and disbelief. "I worked my ass off to make sure we had a future. I've been putting out fires, literal and figurative, trying to fix things, and you've been screwing him behind my back? While I'm trying to build something for us. For our baby." She had the audacity to roll her eyes again, like I was some annoying problem she couldn't wait to get rid of. "It's not about that, Chris. You think you're the victim here? You've been dragging me down for years. This isn't some one-night stand. This has been building up for a long time, and I'm tired. I'm tired of pretending everything's fine when it's not." Her words hit like punches, each one knocking the wind out of me. I couldn't believe this was happening. I couldn't believe this was the woman I'd married. The woman who was supposed to be carrying my child. How had I been so blind? How had I let things get this bad without seeing the cracks before everything shattered? "You're pregnant, Megan?" I said, my voice low, barely holding back the rage boiling beneath the surface. "You don't get to just walk away because things got hard. You don't get to act like this didn't mean anything. Like I didn't mean anything." She stared at me, and for the first time, I saw something flicker across her face. Maybe it was guilt, maybe it was regret, but it was gone as quickly as it appeared. "I didn't want this," she finally said, her voice quieter, almost sad. "I didn't want this life with you anymore, Chris. And this baby, I don't even know what to do now. I didn't want to bring a child into this mess. You should have seen it too." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. This wasn't some bad dream I could wake up from. She was telling me, right there, that our life together had been over long before I even realized it. And now she was ready to walk away, to erase everything, to destroy the one thing I thought could still hold us together, our child. I stood there, my fists clenched, trying to keep it together, but I could feel myself crumbling. "So what happens now?" I asked, my voice hoarse. "What, you run off with him? Forget I ever existed? Pretend like none of this happened?" Megan didn't answer right away. She just stared at me, her face softening for the first time all night. "I don't know," she whispered. "I don't know what happens next. But I can't stay with you, Chris. Not anymore." I took a step back, the weight of her words sinking in. This was it. The end. Everything I had fought for, every bit of hope I had left, was crushed. She wasn't coming back. She wasn't even going to try. She had made up her mind, and I was nothing to her anymore. I looked around the room, at the strangers watching this disaster unfold, at Ryan standing there like he had won something, at Megan, the woman I thought I knew, now someone I couldn't recognize. And I realized, finally, that there was nothing left to fight for. I stood there in the middle of the room, feeling the weight of everything crash down on me. It was like the ground had opened up, and I was free falling into a pit I couldn't escape from. Megan had said her piece, cool, calm, and detached, like she was talking about some minor inconvenience and not our entire life. Ryan was still hanging in the background, looking like he was hoping I'd just disappear. And the party? Everyone was still watching, some with their phones out like they were tuning into a live soap opera. I guess in a way they were. The reality of it all started to sink in. I was fighting for someone who had already left. Megan was gone long before tonight. That coldness in her voice, the way she shifted the blame so easily, like I was the reason she was with Ryan. It was clear that everything I'd been holding on to was just an illusion. But the worst part? She didn't even care. She wasn't even trying to fix things. Not for me. Not for our baby. It was all about her happiness, her needs. Everything else, me, our marriage, our future, was just collateral damage she could brush off without a second thought. "I guess that's it then," I said, my voice sounding distant, even to myself. "You've already made up your mind." Megan didn't say anything. She just stood there, arms crossed, her face a mask of indifference. The silence between us stretched on, like she was waiting for me to walk away, like she was expecting me to give up. But I couldn't let it go that easily. Not yet. There was still one thing I needed to know, something gnawing at me from the inside. "Was it ever real, Megan?" I asked, my voice raw, barely able to hold back the anger and sadness all swirling together. "Any of it? Did I mean anything to you?" For a moment, I thought I saw something flicker in her eyes, something close to regret, maybe even guilt. But it was gone in a second, replaced by that same detached expression she'd been wearing all night. "It was real once," she said softly, not meeting my eyes. "But people change, Chris. Things change. I don't love you anymore. I'm sorry." There it was, the final nail in the coffin. She didn't love me anymore. Maybe she hadn't for a long time. Maybe that's why it was so easy for her to turn to Ryan, to treat me like I was nothing more than a burden she had to deal with until she could break free. I felt this crushing emptiness, a hollow pit where all the love and trust I'd built up over the years had once been. It was gone, burned away just like our house, just like everything else I thought we had. I took a deep breath, trying to find some kind of anchor, something to hold on to before I drowned in this mess. "And the baby?" I asked, my voice quieter now, almost pleading. "What about our baby, Megan? You can't just walk away from that." Megan sighed, rubbing her forehead like she was dealing with a headache. "I don't know, Chris. I really don't. I didn't plan on this happening. Getting pregnant, everything falling apart. It's complicated. I still don't even know what I'm going to do." Complicated. That was her answer. Not commitment, not love, not even hope. Just some vague, empty word that left more questions than answers. I thought about everything I'd pictured for us. Everything I thought we were working toward. Family. Future. But now, all of that felt like a distant dream, slipping further and further away the longer I stood there. Ryan, still lurking nearby, finally spoke up again. "Look, man, maybe it's better if we all just take a step back, cool off, figure things out later. There's no need to keep doing this here." The sheer audacity of him to speak, to act like he had any right to be involved in this conversation, set something off in me. My vision tunneled, and I could feel my fists clenching again, the anger rising like a wave ready to crash over me. But then I stopped myself. What was the point? What would hitting him solve? Megan wasn't going to magically come back to me. She had made her choice, and fighting Ryan wouldn't change any of that. So I did the only thing I could. I laughed. It was bitter, broken, and sounded like someone else. But I couldn't help it. The absurdity of the situation, the complete destruction of everything I thought I knew. It all hit me at once, and the laugh just came out. Megan looked at me like I'd lost it, which maybe I had. "What's so funny?" she asked, her voice sharp, annoyed even. I shook my head, still laughing, though there was no joy in it. "This," I said, gesturing around the room. "All of this, the lies, the betrayal, the fact that I thought we were going to be okay. That I actually believed we could still be a family." Megan opened her mouth to say something, but I wasn't listening anymore. It didn't matter. None of it did. I could feel the last bits of hope slipping through my fingers, and for the first time all night, I accepted it. There was no fixing this. There was no saving us. I stepped back, taking one last look at her, the woman who had torn me apart. She looked back at me, and for the first time, I saw her for what she really was. A stranger. Someone I used to know, but not anymore. "You know what, Megan?" I said, my voice steady, surprising even myself. "I'm done too. I don't need you to figure things out. You want to leave? Fine, leave. But don't expect me to wait around while you decide what you want. I deserve better than this. I deserve better than you." Her face hardened again, but she didn't argue. She didn't try to stop me, and that was all I needed to know. I turned and walked away, pushing through the crowd, past the whispers and stares, out into the night air. It was cold, but I didn't feel it. All I felt was the hollow space where my heart used to be. This was the end of us. There was nothing left to say, nothing left to save. And as I walked to my car, leaving Megan and Ryan and everything behind, one thought kept running through my mind. What the hell do I do now? I stumbled out of that house, the freezing night air hitting me like a slap to the face. It was sobering, in a way, but nothing could pull me out of the chaos raging inside. I kept walking, each step heavy like my legs were made of concrete. It was over. Done. Megan had said everything she needed to say, and it wasn't going to change. She didn't love me, didn't want me, and worst of all, wasn't even sure about keeping our baby. I unlocked the car, hands still shaking from the confrontation, and sank into the driver's seat. The silence in the car felt deafening compared to the noise inside the house. I just sat there, staring out at the street, trying to process what had just happened. How do you move on from something like this? From the woman you thought you'd spend the rest of your life with, telling you to your face that it's over? That she's been with someone else for months? And worse, that she never wanted the life you'd built together? The rage flared up again, but this time it wasn't directed at Megan. It was at myself. How could I have been so blind? How had I not seen this coming? Sure, the signs were there. The late nights, the constant excuses, the coldness that had crept into our marriage, but I'd ignored them. Maybe because I was scared of facing the truth. Maybe because I thought things would just get better, like some sort of miracle would fix everything. But no miracle was coming. The reality was here now, and it was ugly. I felt hollow, like someone had taken everything I'd worked for and set it on fire, just like the house. And the worst part? I had no idea where to go from here. I reached into my jacket pocket and pulled out my phone. No missed calls. No texts. Not that I expected Megan to reach out. She'd made herself clear. But part of me, some pathetic, desperate part, had still hoped she'd regret what she said. That maybe, after I left, she'd realize she'd made a mistake and call me. But the screen stayed blank. Just like everything between us now. I dropped the phone onto the passenger seat and rubbed my face with my hands, trying to calm down. But I couldn't. My mind kept replaying everything. Megan's cold, detached confession. The way she looked at Ryan. How easily she tossed aside everything we had. And then there was that final blow, the baby, our child. I felt sick. I didn't know what was worse. The fact that she was pregnant with our baby while screwing another man, or the fact that she wasn't even sure she wanted to keep it. A sudden wave of panic hit me. What if she decided to get rid of the baby without even telling me? She had already proven that she could hide things from me, lie to my face while acting like everything was fine. What if she made a decision, and I wasn't even a part of it? I gripped the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. I couldn't let that happen. No matter how much I hated her right now, no matter how shattered our marriage was, that baby was still mine, and I wasn't going to let her take that from me. I fired up the engine, my mind racing with 1,000 thoughts. I needed to get out of here. I needed to think. Driving always helped clear my head. But this time, the road stretched out in front of me like some kind of escape route from the hell I just walked out of. I pulled out of the neighborhood, feeling the weight of everything hit harder with every mile I put between us. But the further I drove, the more I realized something. There was no running from this. No matter how fast or far I went, the truth of what Megan had done would still be there, staring back at me. The betrayal, the lies, the total collapse of our life. It was all too real. After what felt like hours, I found myself parked outside a 24-hour diner. It was one of those spots we used to hit late at night when we were younger, when we still cared about each other before things fell apart. I didn't even know why I ended up here. Maybe some part of me was clinging to the past, to the memories of when things weren't a total disaster. I stepped inside, the warm air and smell of stale coffee hitting me as I found a booth in the corner. The place was practically empty, just an old man nursing a cup of coffee at the counter, and a waitress who barely looked up when I walked in. Perfect. The last thing I needed right now was conversation. I sat there for a long time, staring out the window, watching the cars pass by on the empty street. My mind kept going back to Megan, to the things she said, to the way she looked at me like I was some stranger. And that baby, our baby, I felt this deep ache in my chest every time I thought about it. I wanted to be a dad. I always had. I pictured what life would be like, raising a kid with Megan. How it would bring us closer, how we'd fix things, rebuild after the fire, literally and figuratively. But now, I didn't even know if that future existed. The waitress finally came over, placing a cup of coffee in front of me without a word. I hadn't even ordered it, but I nodded at her anyway. I took a sip, the bitter taste doing nothing to ease the storm inside me. I pulled out my phone again, scrolling through old photos, back when Megan and I were still happy, still trying. There was one from a vacation we took years ago. She was smiling and I was laughing, holding the camera. We looked so normal, so in love. But those people were gone now. Maybe they'd never really existed. Maybe it was all just a lie we told ourselves to keep things together. I swiped through the pictures, my heart sinking deeper with each one. And then, I saw it. A recent photo from the night we found out she was pregnant. She was smiling, a real, genuine smile. And I remember thinking how beautiful she looked, how excited I was. I thought that moment would change everything for the better. But it hadn't. It had only pushed her further away, into Ryan's arms, into a place where I couldn't reach her anymore. The phone buzzed in my hand, snapping me out of my thoughts. I glanced down. It was Megan. For a split second, my heart jumped. Was she going to apologize? Regret everything? Tell me she'd made a mistake? I opened the message. We need to talk. Tomorrow. That was it. No apology. No explanation. Just cold and clinical like the Megan I just walked out on. I set the phone down and stared at it, the weight of that message sinking in. Tomorrow, another confrontation, another chapter of this nightmare. I took a long, slow breath, staring out the window again, watching the world move on without me. Tomorrow. The morning light slipped through the cracks of my hotel room blinds, but it brought no warmth. The day felt cold, heavy. Megan's message from last night sat on my phone like a ticking bomb. We need to talk. Tomorrow. It echoed in my head, gnawing at me. I had barely slept, running through every possible scenario of how our conversation would go. Would she try to justify it all again? Would she drop another bombshell about the baby? Would she finally admit that she felt something about what she'd done? Or would she keep acting like I was the problem and she was the one who had been wronged? Whatever it was, I wasn't ready, but I knew I had no choice. By noon, I was in my car, heading toward the park Megan had picked as our meeting spot. Of all places, she wanted to meet in the park where we used to go when we first started dating, back when we couldn't get enough of each other. The irony wasn't lost on me. The place where everything began was about to be the place where it all ended. I pulled into the parking lot and saw her sitting at a bench near the water, her back to me. She looked calm, like she hadn't torn our life to shreds just hours ago. I could feel the anger rising again, but I forced myself to push it down. I wasn't here to explode. I was here for answers, for closure if that was even possible. I walked over slowly, my footsteps crunching against the gravel. She didn't turn around, but I knew she heard me. Finally, I sat down across from her, the tension between us so thick it felt like a physical barrier. For a moment, neither of us said anything. The sound of the water lapping against the shore was the only thing filling the silence. So, I said, my voice hard, "You wanted to talk." Megan sighed, finally looking up at me. There was no guilt in her eyes, no regret, just exhaustion, like she was tired of everything, including me. "I've made my decision," she said flatly, and just like that, my heart sank. Whatever little hope I had left that she might reconsider, that she might fight for us, vanished. "I'm going to keep the baby, Chris," she continued, "but I don't want you involved." It was like someone had driven a knife straight through me. I knew Megan was capable of coldness, but this, cutting me out of my own child's life? I didn't even have words. I just stared at her, trying to wrap my head around what she was saying. "I think it's best if we go our separate ways," she added, her voice steady, almost rehearsed. "I don't want to drag this out any longer than it has to be. You'll get what's fair, financially, I mean. But as for the baby, I don't think it's healthy for either of us to pretend like we can be some kind of family." I blinked, trying to process the words coming out of her mouth. She was cutting me out, completely, like I was a stranger, like I had no right to be part of my own kid's life. "You're seriously doing this?" I finally managed to choke out, my voice raw. "You're going to keep my child from me?" Megan looked away, her jaw tight. "It's not just about you, Chris. This isn't working. It hasn't worked for a long time. I need to move on, and I need to do what's best for the baby. You have to see that." "No," I snapped, the anger boiling over. "What I see is you making decisions on your own, like none of this matters. Like I don't matter. That's my child too, Megan. You don't get to decide that I'm just gone." She looked at me then, her eyes narrowing. "I think it's better this way. You can't pretend like we could raise this baby together. Look at us, Chris. Look at what we've done to each other. Do you really think that's a healthy environment for a child?" Her words felt like daggers. I wanted to scream at her, to make her understand that this wasn't just about our broken marriage. But she had already made up her mind. I could see it in the way she talked, the way she looked at me, like she had already erased me from her life, and now she was just tying up the loose ends. I stood up, unable to sit there any longer. My hands were shaking, and my chest felt tight, like I was about to collapse under the weight of everything. "You don't get to do this, Megan," I said, my voice low but furious. "You don't get to cut me out like this." Megan sighed again, standing up to face me. "I'm sorry, Chris, but this is the way it has to be. You'll move on. We both will. You'll be better off without me." I stared at her, this woman who had once been my everything, now a stranger telling me I didn't belong in her life, or in our child's life. The pain was unbearable, but I could see there was no point in fighting anymore. She had made her decision. And no matter what I said, no matter how hard I fought, it wouldn't change a damn thing. I hope you can live with yourself, I said, my voice barely above a whisper, because I don't know how you sleep at night. Her expression didn't change. She didn't cry, didn't yell, didn't even flinch. She just stood there, waiting for me to leave. So I did. I walked away, my entire world collapsing behind me. Megan wasn't coming back. She didn't want me, didn't want us. And now I was going to lose my child before I even had the chance to be a father. As I got into the car and drove away, the finality of it all hit me like a tidal wave. There was no more hope, no more fighting, just this endless, crushing emptiness where my life used to be. And for the first time since this whole nightmare began, I realized what I had to do. I had to start over, without Megan, without the life I thought I was going to have. But one thing was certain, I wasn't giving up on my child. Not now, not ever. Megan may have closed the door on me, but I wasn't going to let her slam it on my baby's future. And that, at least, gave me something to fight for. Something worth holding onto in the wreckage of everything else.